You know, in politics, when you're trying to sway someone's opinion or change someone's mind, you can appeal to the bottom line. You make the money argument. Well, that's exactly what death penalty opponents in California are doing. They're proposing a bill to do away with executions because the death penalty costs too much. $184 million in that state every year for the court appeals and incarcerating those inmates. Plus, the death row convicts typically die of old age rather than lethal injection. Some of the most infamous inmates sitting on San Quentin's death row include Scott Peterson, who murdered his wife Lacey; Richard Ramirez, nicknamed the Night Stalker, responsible for at least 14 killings; and Richard Davis, who kidnapped and murdered 12-year-old Polly Klaas in 1993. Mark Klaas is Polly's father, and Lorraine Taylor's twin sons were gunned down in a drive-by shooting in 2000. Their murderers have never been brought to justice. Mark, let me begin with you.
Sure.
Does the money argument about how much it costs to sustain the appeals process, to keep death row inmates on death row, does it influence at all your opinion about the death penalty?
Well, Contessa, thank you for having me on, but let me say that this is nothing more than a cynical attempt by the California legislature to undermine the will of the people and to subvert the law of the land. There are very easy fixes that could streamline and push this process forward much more quickly. For instance, in California, we have more than 170,000 practicing lawyers. However, only 100 lawyers, or less than 100 lawyers, are qualified to handle death penalty appeals. This creates a backlog of a decade before they first get those appeals to the California Supreme Court. Secondly, a state amendment could a constitutional amendment could very easily create an environment where the State Court of Appeals would be able to hear death penalty reviews with the subsequent review by the Supreme Court. In California, currently, only the Supreme Court can hear these kinds of reviews.
You know, Lorraine, the murderers of your kids are still at large. Nobody knows where they are. At this point, when you're talking about justice and whether the death penalty brings families closure and the justice they so deserve, do you think that the cost argument should sway at all the argument about the death penalty?
Yes, Contessa, it plays a large role in violence prevention. I think that the more than $4 billion spent since 1978 on the death penalty could have been better spent on violence prevention, on helping grieving families like myself, and also on putting more law enforcement officers on the street in our community.
You know, it's interesting that people are making the cost argument now in California. I should mention that there's not a lot of optimism that they will be able to overturn the death penalty in California based on the cost argument. But what do you think, Lorraine? Do you think that this is a topic of conversation that needs to be brought up in more states that currently support the death penalty?
Oh, definitely. I'm thinking of the mothers, I'm thinking of the fathers, the children, the grandmothers who are taking care of children left behind. The pain and suffering that comes along with watching someone on death row is both morally, ethically, and spiritually wrong. The end does not justify the means. What you have is the government and the taxpayers paying lots of money to watch someone be put to death in the end. And the dead person knows nothing. It's the families that suffer. It's the taxpayers that suffers.
Mark, Mark, I just wanted to bring you in before I have to close here. But in a personal way, do you think that seeing your daughter's killer executed would bring you more peace, more closure than currently you feel?
Absolutely, yeah. This guy deserves to die, as do the entire lineup you showed and the entire 714 individuals on death row. And I want to reiterate, this is not a moral or a spiritual argument that's being made. This is a financial argument, and it's a very cynical one.
Mark Klaas, Lorraine Taylor, my thanks.